What is up, everybody? Happy Wednesday to you and yours. Another live edition, our second of the week. We had our live reaction show on Saturday. Now we've got our coach's interview. We're calling it Inside the 419. We've got Justin Keller one-on-one here tonight. So that's coming up next on Gridiron 419. So welcome in, everybody. I'm Chris. He's Dan. We appreciate you spending some time with us here and excited to have our first coaching interview of the year. And we will do that here in just a few moments. But as we kind of look towards week 2, it's kind of interesting. You and I had our breakdown of what we thought was going to happen in week 1. We talked about all that on the show on Saturday. But it'll be interesting to see because we just have such a small sample size. And we'll obviously have our game preview for week 2 on Friday. But we have such a small sample size, so you're trying to make a lot of assumptions based off of very little evidence.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Kind of, especially at this point, everybody is 0-0, so everyone there's very little tape on everyone, at least current tape. So you're kind of making your best guess. But this is the fun part because usually that biggest jump happens from week 1 to week 2. So it'll be interesting to not only evaluate going into week 2, but then when we talk again on Saturday about it and see where everyone we feel everyone kind of sits as we start to ramp up into conference play.
Well, and you always have those schools that are in 3 categories, which is they are who we thought they were, we're still not sure, and better buckle up for a long season. I mean, you kind of always have those, and it'll be fun to kind of see on Saturday morning where we're at after all of the games are played. Again, we're going to be talking with Whitmer head coach Justin Keller here in just a moment. Before we do, want to say thank you to one of our sponsors, and that's Car Stereo One. If you spend a lot of time in your car, why settle for a factory setup that sounds like it? Car Stereo One has been serving Toledo and the surrounding area for more than 30 years, helping drivers upgrade the way their vehicle looks, sounds, and feels. From car stereos and speakers and subwoofers to Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, Car Stereo One can help build the system that fits your ride, and they do a lot more than just audio. Remote starters, window tint, custom interiors, vehicle wraps, wheels, and even marine and power sport electronics. Whether you're making a small upgrade or completely transforming your vehicle, let the experts at Car Stereo One help you do it right. Visit them in person at 3120 Central Avenue in Toledo or call them 419-474-5553 or online at carstereo1.com. Car Stereo One, Toledo's car entertainment leader. And as I say, I'd be remiss not to say turtle afterwards. And at this point, we will bring in everybody's favorite Whitmer Hall of Famer and also the head coach, the head coach of the Whitmer Panthers, Justin Keller. You have to put up with a lot of my ribbing, so I appreciate you doing this as always. I think about last season, and I kind of talked with you about this during the off season about you've kind of gone through all those firsts now, this being year number 2. What was the biggest difference between starting off in year 1 and year 2? Or maybe there wasn't a difference.
There's definitely a difference. And I think, you have to be a little self-aware and reflective on what worked and what didn't last year. And I went in last year with a plan on what I want to do. And you had to be honest with yourself on, what needs to be fixed. So I had some thoughts and ideas, just some general things, whether it be practice plans, just administrative duties, stuff like that I needed to get better at. And, and I'll just continue to grow as hopefully the years go on here.
Is it difficult to be self-reflective and self-critical? Because that's not an easy task to do, to sit there and say, all right, I know I did some stuff well, but we're all human. We know we do stuff wrong. So was it difficult to kind of sit back and identify those things that maybe you'd like to change or thought you could do better?
For me, it's really not. I was one of those guys put it football perspective. When I was the OC, we could have scored 48 points, and I'm looking at film like, why didn't we score 56?
Yeah.
So it's really easy for me. And sometimes I'm probably too hard on myself, and then it's hard for me to look at what's working, and I might want to make wholesale changes. I have something that's working really well. And sometimes it's hard for me to identify those things.
Yeah. The temptation is to sometimes just change everything, or we are good, but we could be even better. And so sometimes throwing the baby out with the bathwater becomes the temptation, I'd imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of new faces on the coaching staff this year. I know we had some longtime assistants retire and kind of step away. We brought in some new guys. Jacob Top, one of the names that folks might recognize, former head coach up in Michigan. Some other guys as well. Jefferson Edwards over from St. Francis.
Yep.
When you think about trying to combine guys who had been with this program for a while, and then you're trying to bring in new guys, what is the most difficult thing about trying to mesh all those different things? Because I've talked with a lot of coaches. I'm sure you feel the same way. Sometimes when you bring somebody in, you almost have to coach your coaches to kind of get on the same page as everybody else. So how has that meshing gone so far?
I think it's gone really well. They've been great fits to our staff. And I think that's that's probably the top 3 or 4 things is how well they're going to mesh and get along with the rest of the staff. And I've been very pleased so far with the way the staff from last year has accepted those guys. And I think the transition's been really smooth.
When you think about new ideas coming in, has any of those guys, or I'm sure some of those guys have brought in things from the outside that you look at and say, maybe we could do that, or maybe there's something here. Has there been anything that those guys have brought to the table that have even made you think maybe that's a better way to go?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I sat down with Coach Top, he has head coach experience. He's been a successful head coach, and that's one of the things I told him. Like, I want feedback, I want ideas, and don't be shy. Whether it's stuff in that offensive room or even with me, like I want to grow as a coach, and if he's got suggestions or things that worked in the past, like I want to know.
A lot of fresh faces on the field this year as we start to talk about the 2026 Panthers. Lots of sophomores. I had said this on the pregame show that all anybody had to do was be around that facility over the last few years. And inevitably, when you asked about what's coming up, everybody got super excited about this incoming sophomore class. And we already had some of those guys make an impact as early as last Friday. Some guys are starting. By my count, there were 8 sophomores that are either starting or in the 2 deep at this point. When you think about having all that young talent, how difficult is it to basically sit there and kind of deal with the fact that there's a lot of potential there, but you're also going to have mistakes, as we saw last Friday?
Yeah, that's just part of it, right? I mean, we know we're young. Our goal is to get better every single day, and hopefully by the end of the season, we put ourselves in a position to be able to compete for another league title. And but having said that, there will be growing pains, and there will be some mental mistakes as they're learning the offense and learning the way we do things. And the physical mistakes are going to come along with that too. And you just have to be patient as a staff and continue to coach those guys up and love them up and get them one day better.
When you had a chance to watch back on Friday, again, a 42-23 win over Reynoldsburg, and that score maybe not indicative even of how close that game was into the third quarter. It was a Reynoldsburg team that fell behind 21-0 and then were able to kind of slowly claw their way back in, largely due to some some miscues on your part, or on your team's part. But overall, was a very competitive team. When you think back to Friday and you watch that film, what was one thing that stood out to you from your team that you liked and something that you didn't like?
I like the fact that we weathered the storm there. They had that big kickoff return to start the third quarter, and they made it a 1-possession game. As you said, we were up, 21-0, and they were able to cut it to a possession, but we stayed the course and kind of broke it open there and wore them down. But, especially with a young team, you got a team like Reynoldsburg who's they're not going to quit. They were big and athletic and well coached. And it would have been easy for a bunch of, as you said, like 8 different guys, sophomores playing, even a freshman at times playing on the O-line. So, again, to be able to weather that storm and be able to put them away later in the game, I was proud of that.
When you think about that inconsistency, was that maybe where you guys were most disappointed, was the fact that, again, not that you don't expect it, but maybe it doesn't cost you Friday, but it might cost you this Friday or another Friday?
Yeah, we actually talked about that today. It's just, when you're playing team like King, which we have coming up on Friday, you can't let up. I mean, you have to be locked in and focused for 100% of the game. You can't have those lapses. And as I look back at the game, though, I think, when Jamon went out of the game, I think it took a little bit of wind out of our sail a little bit.
Yeah.
And, we had to adjust trying to finish that game without him, which, we came out the second half, and I thought offensively did a really nice job, like I said, responding to them, that opening touchdown that they had on their first drive.
I do want to talk about Jameel Small just for a second, because to me, what he gave you on Friday was really a gritty performance. Folks probably didn't realize that he was a little nicked up coming into the game, played through that. Not a lot to him. I know I joked with you. He's listed at 160, and obviously there's a lot of folks who would probably like to have him on a Toledo scale to see if that's indeed the case. But you think about his size and speed, and a guy that ran with physicality, ran with speed, ran with power, ran with vision, and you don't have him in that second half, and it's an entirely different thing, I think.
Yeah, no, we're fortunate that he stepped up the way he did, and as you said, he was injured, but Jameel's the type of kid, he's not going to say a word. He's just going to go out there and continue to play and give it 100%. I'm happy for him too, because last year as a junior, he's behind all three of those backs last year.
Yeah.
So he had very limited opportunities. So for him in this opening game to be able to get out there and prove what he could do was, I was happy for him.
Film always looks different on Saturday. I'm curious, was there anything that you walked out of the building on Friday saying, man, we did not do that well, and then when you watched it back Saturday morning, you felt a lot better about something that you did that maybe you didn't think you did as well the night before?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I thought the play of our offensive line was much better than what I thought it was during the game. We had some Jaden Ladner made his first start at right tackle, and I thought he played a great game. And Marcus Whitaker, a sophomore center, we had some snap issues, which again, those are the growing pains you're going to go through. But as far as his blocking assignments and the way he hung in there against some of those bigger kids from Reynoldsburg, I was really proud of his effort too. And then, Riley Levo going to left tackle, he played well. And then, Carter Baldwin did what he does, so no surprise out of him. But I was really pleased with their overall effort.
I thought it was interesting that he was that kind of a host that he almost blocked that kid into the hospitality tent just to try and give him a snack in the middle. But
I know.
threw a flag on it for some reason.
I know.
But that offensive line, that's an area where maybe coming into the year, you guys would have looked at it and said, this is going to be a weak spot on this team. And after Friday, granted, you'll obviously have to see it against different levels of competition. It's not to disrespect Reynoldsburg, but this is a group that, as they mature and with the size that you have there, you can't teach that part of it. And even when you're talking about, the center snapping issues, those are things that can be corrected and taught. You can't teach blocking. You can't teach leverage. Those are not the easy parts. And also the other part that you told me, when you think about the play of Marcus Whitaker, the fact that he's only been playing football for a little over a year, which to think about the leap he's made from last year to this year that's incredible to be starting. There aren't many guys, to put it this way, that would be starting at center their second year ever of playing football on the varsity level, especially at a school like Whitmer.
Yeah, no, I'm really proud of him. And again, there's been some issues with snaps, but I'm telling you, he's been getting better and better every week. And the one thing I love most about him is he's unflappable. Like, he'll have a bad snap and he just, he wants the ball back. He's ready for the next snap, and he's going to keep battling and grinding and just works to get better all the time. Even after the game, he came in the coach's office and asked if he could take a ball home over the weekend, continue working on his snapping. So I just love his mindset, his mentality, and his approach to the game. And again, this is only his second year playing. Like, he's got a bright future as a football player.
I think about too, as far as units are concerned, that defense was another area. I know we could probably say this about every area on the team, but got a lot of young guys playing or guys who are just getting their first start. And that game, as we said, 21-0, but in the early part of the third quarter, it becomes 21-13 and stays that way for a little while. And you think about the way that your defense played And Brock Duvall obviously had a nice game. Tim Pettaway had a nice game as well. So 2 guys that started a year ago. But then you also had some younger guys step up in that game. I not remember the name of the one linebacker that we talked about afterwards, but he played well in his first start. There were other guys that I thought, if that defense doesn't hold and keep Reynoldsburg out when it's 8 points and all of a sudden maybe that becomes 21-20 or 21 all, what a difference that game feels like in that third quarter. So that defense that you weren't sure you were going to be able to rely upon as much, you had to lean on them pretty heavy, and I thought they answered the bell.
Yeah, Jermaine Johnson was
Thank you.
Yeah. making his first start, and he played a great game. And we have a lot of holes to fill, a lot of pieces to replace from last year. But when you have a guy like Tim Pettaway, on your defensive front, he's been a great leader and a high motor guy. You got Brock Duvall in the middle at linebacker and Cam Sanders as a returner in the back.
Yeah.
So, we have the right guys returning in the right spots to offer that leadership that this defense needs. Whether it's leading by example, their vocal leaders on the field and their guys that these younger guys want to follow.
And they're program guys too. When you talk about, and I'll highlight Tim just as an example. I spent a lot of time kind of talking about him with you guys after the game last Friday. When you looked at Tim Pettaway as a sophomore, he was not even close to the size that he is today or the strength. And that's the testament to a guy who probably was in nobody's too deep coming into junior year and just worked. Obviously, Mother Nature had a hand in that, but he just kept working and getting better and trying to become somebody that was going to contribute on this team. And now you're starting to see that pay off for him. And we had always talked about program guys all the way back to when you and I first became acquainted about it's so important to have those guys who are in the conversation for all 4 years. And no, they're not going to be guys that maybe contribute right away, but you and I always talk about the guy that you think will never help you as a freshman may end up being one of your best players by the time he's a senior.
It's no coincidence. One, Tim's a great kid, 3-4 student. He's a, model student in the hallways of Whitmer. And he loves football. He just loves football. He was around even in the off season. Like he would show up to throwing sessions and try to learn O-line or O-line technique if we ever needed him at tight end. He just loves to be around. He loves the game. He plays for the right reasons. And again, if every kid had his mindset and his approach to the game, man, we would be in tremendous shape right now.
Well, the good news, week one gave you something to evaluate. Obviously, the challenge changes this week. Before we talk about Detroit King, we do want to thank one of our other sponsors, and that is Victory Auto Mall. Finding the right vehicle is important. Finding a dealership that makes the process simple can be even more important. Victory Auto Mall is locally based used car dealer on Lasky Road in Toledo, offering a wide selection of cars, trucks, and SUVs, as well as crossovers and more. And as a buy here, pay here dealership, Victory Auto Mall works to help customers find a vehicle and financing option that fits their solution. Their focus is on a straightforward, no-pressure buying experience with knowledgeable service and plenty of inventory to choose from. So whether you're looking for that first vehicle replacing the family car or just ready for something to start with, you're searching at Victory Auto Mall, 1632 West Lasky Road in Toledo, 419-345-3603, or browse the inventory online at WeFinanceCarsToday.com. Victory Auto Mall, helping Toledo drivers find their next ride. And I had said to Dan the last time I drove past the Victory Auto Mall lot, there were a bunch of Corvettes that were on the lot, which I was certainly tempted to go in and test drive, but I think I'd be divorced if I did. So anyway, on to Detroit King. What's the jump? I mean, you've obviously got a chance to watch them on film. How significant is the jump for Reynoldsburg to Detroit King and all the intangibles?
I just think, Reynoldsburg had pieces here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I think King's the total package as far as they don't have a weakness up front defensively. Their linebackers are aggressive and fly around. They have all kinds of speed in the back half. A couple of those guys play receiver as well. Their O-line is more consistent across the board. They have a couple the Henry brothers up there, and they're going to be a problem. So I just think across the board, there's a little bigger, a little faster, and they're a well-coached program.
When you look at the team and you think about that early game, what do you think? Just obviously you go from week one not knowing what to expect to the team saw a live team basically that wasn't a scrimmage setting, wasn't a controlled environment. What did you see, or what would you think after watching your team? How do you think they'll try and adjust to handle that jump? Because we've said it with Central Catholic in the past. When you see it, you really can't rep it until you see it up close. So with a young team, are you concerned that they may not be able to handle that jump that quickly?
No, I think they're more than capable. It's going to take a tremendous effort on their part, and it's going to take 48 minutes of football to get it done. When you look at King and you look at last year's game even, and I think I'm not sure from top to bottom they're as talented as last year. And when we look at last year's game, it was, we shot ourselves in the foot early. We turned it over on the first play of the game. Carter Bourne goes out, and then, we give up a big play to Dukes, like a 60-yard run. And I really go back and look at that. We had 3 plays there that if they just go the other way, that's a different game, because it was 20-6 early, and it was 26 for a long time in that game. Yeah. For a long time. And I need to remind our players of that. Like, we were right there, and don't be overwhelmed by, the atmosphere we're walking into and what had happened last year. But remember how close we were last year. I think it's important.
How difficult is it to prepare for a team? Obviously, Michigan doesn't start until this week, so you don't have any game film. You just have scrimmage film. So how difficult is that to prepare for a team when you don't have an actual game to evaluate?
Well, it's a double-edged sword for us. I mean, on the one hand, we at least got a game under our belt, right? On the other side is, like you said, we don't really get a chance to see them. Their last scrimmage was more of a controlled scrimmage, and they had a lot of guys rotating in and out, so it was really hard to identify who some of those new starters were on defense for them. And they're not wearing their game jerseys, so it's hard to get numbers and stuff like that too. So those things are a little bit challenging, but I'll take the situation we're in and at least get that game under our belt before we ride up there.
You mentioned a lot of really good players. They've got several guys that are going to play Division I college football. Daryl Flemmister, Don Spillers, the offensive lineman that mentioned, one of the Henry brothers, has offers as well. Amir Forrest, the freshman quarterback, even though he's only going to be a sophomore, already has a handful of offers. Not that offers are the be-all and end-all of how good a team is, but when you're trying to identify these players, how important is it for the defense in particular, but probably even on the offensive side, to make sure you know where Flemmister and Spillers and those guys are? Because it's probably easy with so many different players on the field to lose track of those guys, but really you cannot allow yourself to kind of take a playoff. You already mentioned last year, Michael Dukes was a monster in that game. He's at Rutgers, at least mercifully for Whitmer this year, but those two guys can be just as dangerous and can hurt you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be important for us to keep everything in front of us. I mean, we know they're going to make some plays. I mean, that's going to happen. But at the end of the day, we just got to make sure that we do our best to keep everything in front of us and try to contain those guys, make them earn everything they get. That just getting back to that bend but don't break mentality. And if we can do that and force them to sustain drives, we'll give ourselves a chance defensively.
We talk about measuring stick games too. You and I have had this conversation. There's always a different philosophy on how you want to schedule in the non-conference. And do you go tough with one and easier with another? Do you do competitive with both? Do you make them both cakewalks? A lot of coaches have a lot of different philosophies on it. I think you and I are of the same mindset, that you want one that you feel like you've got a good chance of winning, and you want another one that's going to really test you. Not that you can't win that game, but you want to be tested. And it's important, especially with a young group, to set that baseline to say, this is what we have to be if we want to be a championship club. How important is it to make sure that you continue to schedule games like these so that you do know, hey, we can't just think that we're going to roll over and be a championship club. Like sometimes you've got to see what other teams are that are having a really great pedigree like a King team does to really start to see this is how you have to play the game if you want to win.
Yeah, I think it's important. And it's so, like last year, we lose to Eds the third round of the playoffs. And, you look back and those kids that played in that game, they, a year older now, they look back and they can probably be honest with themselves and say that we're not quite
sure
caliber yet. It's a lot easier, like you said, when you're playing them early in the season, a team like that, a King or an Eds or whatever it may be, where you're really challenging yourselves. And then within the same season, football season, you can look back and say, hey, this is where we need to be if we want to get to where we want to get. And I do think it's important. And, it's like I said, sometimes it's I don't think it's a detriment, but at the same time with the young team, you have to make sure that they maintain their confidence and they have the belief that they can go in there and win the game. And I think if we stay within ourselves, we're going to hopefully keep it close. And in the fourth quarter, anything can happen.
Well, we use the phrase, the standard. A lot of coaches use that. And sometimes you don't know what the standard is if you've not had to do it before or you haven't seen it before. And sometimes just having that example, a concrete thing to put up on film and say, this is what we have to play like if we want to beat good teams. And I think you highlighted it. Maybe the playoffs, again, you and I talked about the region shifting a little bit, but when you get to the playoffs, I think the best phrase that I've always heard is that every week you're playing a good team. Eventually you get to the point where nobody's going to be the talent gap is not as lopsided at that point.
Sure.
I think about a situation like that to at least have that example to keep putting up there and using as, hey, this is what we have to do. Even if we do come out on top, you have to play that exact same way week in and week out if you want to achieve those goals. It's easy to forget that, I think, sometimes of what that takes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, but at the same time, you have to have a team with enough resiliency.
Absolutely.
To be overcome the adversity, not just from week to week, but even throughout the game. And I think when you going up against a team like King, and I don't care who you're playing, you're going to face adversity at some point, but the amount of adversity or the type of adversity that we're going to face, hopefully, hardens this team and gets those younger guys to grow up quicker than they normally would.
I do want to highlight too, I know that the goal was not to necessarily throw 4 touchdown passes in the game, but 2 of those went to a young guy that everybody is super excited about over at Whitmer by the name of Titus Richardson. And watching him play, very unassuming, not a guy that you would think would have the kind of impact that he can have. But when you think about again, with a sophomore, just starting to scratch the surface of that potential, I've heard phrases like, he reminds me of Nick Whitaker. He reminds me, obviously not size-wise, but, he reminds me of those things.
Sorry. Hold on one second.
That's right. You're good. The magic of live podcasting here.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, you think about some of the comparisons that are being thrown around about him. There's a lot of high praise already, which is really impressive for a kid who really has only been at Whitmer for a few months, essentially.
Yeah, no, he's an electric kid and very coachable and he loves football and is ultra competitive. And, and he's kind of raised the play of all the guys in the receiver room, just by him being here. So obviously he had a direct impact on the game with a couple of touchdown catches on Friday night, but has also, again, those guys have raised their game, just being around him and competing with him in practice every day too.
Before we let you go, when you look at Friday, obviously final score is going to be something that you use as a measuring stick, but what's the one thing that if you walk off the field on Friday would make you feel outside of final score, maybe the most positive? Are you looking for the team to respond to that adversity? Are you looking for them to see how they handle a better team? Is there one area that you're looking at saying, if we do this, even if we lose that game, I'll feel good about where we're at?
Yeah, I think so. I think if there was one thing, I think it is. I think it's the way we're going to be able to respond to some adversity. And like I said, we're gonna face it. And again, whenever you face a good team, you're gonna have to face it. How we respond emotionally, are we able to keep competing and battling, and those types of things. Like I said, with some younger guys, I know what I'm gonna get from the Pettaways and the Duvals.
Yeah.
Like, I know. I mean, those guys have been through it, and they've faced it last year. I know how they're gonna respond. But is their leadership gonna be enough to be able to carry those younger guys through it during the course of a game? That's probably what I'm most going to reflect back on after that game.
It's interesting you say that too, because you always think about the guys who haven't been in that adversity before, but you also don't realize that the guys who have never led during that kind of adversity have to learn how to lead too. There's a way to do it and a way not to, and you find the buttons that you got to push to be able to lead. And as you know, sometimes a coach can talk till he's blue in the face, but if the other guys, those guys who are seen as the leaders in the group, aren't buying in, doesn't make a difference. So those leaders have to learn how to lead a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, no, they're reminded constantly, like, the other 85 guys on the team don't want to hear my voice. I'm looking at the 10 seniors that we're counting on. Like, you guys, this is your team. Like, I hope to be here for a little while, right? You have one shot at this, your last crack at it. So it's your team. You guys need to step up a little bit. And, that's what we're trying to get to with some of these seniors.
Well, you hope to be there for a while because you already ran out of the radio booth once. I don't think you want to have to go back there. It sounds like.
No.
I was talking with Ken Winters, and he had said to me that what made him miss coaching was listening to the games last year. So now between Jerry Bell, you, and Ken Winters, I've had 3 guys that have blamed me for becoming a head coach again. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I said to Ken, am I that awful to listen to that the only way to escape it is to become a head coach again? But he refrained to answer. I don't know why, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But always appreciate talking with you, and I always appreciate your support. I know that you are always our first up on this, and I know you used to phrase yourself as the Alec Baldwin of this show, and I'm just happy that we don't have to treat you like that anymore and bring you on whenever we need someone to show up.
I forgot about that.
You do an incredible impression, though, so I'll leave it at that.
I do no impressions whatsoever. So.
All right, well, I appreciate it, my friend, and I will talk to you later this week. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris.
That was Whitmer head coach Justin Keller here on Gridiron 419. Appreciate him spending some time with us as always. And that Detroit King game, Dan, that we talked about, that's going to be one that you and I will be at, but also I'm really interested to see the way that those guys respond moving forward this week, because that is going to be a real test. We saw it be a test last year. And you think about back to that game when Carter Bourne got knocked out of the game, that really seemed to change the tide in that game a little bit last year. Offensively, I think Whitmer lost a step. So going to be important for guys to obviously stay on the field, but it's not going to be a cakewalk by any means. First game of the season for King at their place. Definitely going to be a tough environment for sure.
And I think that's something Coach Todd definitely talked about, is not only just using this game as a measuring stick, but also as kind of that gut check. Like, okay, even if this is a team that does have some great talent in positions, how hard are you going to make it on them? How much are you going to make them earn any points they get or any success that they have? They're already, like you said, they've already showed the resilience in that second half of the Reynoldsburg game to hold another pretty talented quarterback that surprised a lot of us sitting there watching him, not just because he was way bigger than he was listed.
That's for sure. Yeah.
But he had a ton of tools there at his disposal and was able to do a lot. So I think that's going to be one of the important things is that gut check. What exactly are we going to be able to accomplish on that field?
And I believe that measuring stick is so important, and I'm sure all the coaches we'll talk to will have one of those types of games where they'll look at it and say, all right, if we can compete with X, then I think we can compete with anybody. And this is one of those games that if you can compete with Detroit King, you can kind of compete with anybody.
Yeah, I'm sure that as we go through that roster and kind of look at it, you could point to a number of guys like, okay, well, you're not going to face another wide receiver of this caliber. Right. So we can be successful and contain him, then we can contain anybody in the league, kind of thing.
Well, that'll do it for the Inside the 419 on Gridiron 419. Again, each and every week, we're going to bring a coach to you on Wednesdays. I want to thank again Justin Keller for spending some time with us tonight. Not easy to hang around the office late, but he did that for us, which I do appreciate. Some programming notes. Of course, our game preview will be up on Friday morning at 11 a.m. So Dan and I will give you all of our 5 best from the area, and then also kind of give you some of the other games to watch this weekend. And then for the second week in a row, we're going to be doing our live reaction show, coincidentally, also at 11 a.m. on Saturday. We'll break down the games from the night before. And then kind of just a reminder that once we get into college football, we're not going to interrupt your Saturdays with that, but we will have a reaction show on Sundays, and we'll be able to reset from the weekend and then kind of start to preview what's going to happen in the upcoming week. So excited to be with you 3 times a week through the rest of the football season. So again, game previews on Friday at 11, and then we will be back on Saturday morning, 11 a.m. with a live reaction show. So we will once again say thank you to Justin Keller for spending some time with us, and we will see you on Friday. Until then, everybody, bye-bye.